The first thing we're going to do is put down a bed of gravel that is 4 inches thick. This building is going to be 20 feet by 60 feet because we want the maximum amount of surface area facing the sun. On top of that, we're going to have 2 inches of rigid foam insulation. On top of the insulation is going to be a 6 mil layer of vapor barrier. This is basically just a heavy duty sheet of plastic. If there are any seams, you will have to tape them to prevent moisture from getting in or out. On top of the vapor barrier, we're going to pour 4 inches of concrete. The walls are going to be 2 by 6, which is actually 5.5. So I'm going to set my anchor bolts in at 2 3/4 inches. The first anchor bolt should be within 12 inches of the corner, and the others should be a maximum of 6 feet, but could be less. I'm just putting them every 24 inches because I like a lot of anchor bolts. And my studs are going to be 24 inches on center. Now I'm just going to put my sill sealer along the edges. This will prevent moisture from wicking up from the concrete into the bottom plates of the walls. Now I'm going to start constructing my first wall. I'm going to build it laying down like most people would do. I can't build the 60-foot wall in one section, so I'm going to build it in 4 sections of 15 feet each. I think they call this a California corner, where you put a stud on its side so you have something to nail your drywall to. I'm going to have two windows here, one on top of the other. The bottom one is going to be 6 feet by 6 feet, and the top one is going to be 6 feet by 3 feet. The walls are 2 by 6, but the interior studs are 2 by 4s, and I will show you why a little bit later. Now I'm just going to frame a rough opening for my windows. I decided that the framing around the windows needed to be 2 by 6s so that I would have something to attach the windows to. But I redesigned these rough openings a little bit later on in the video. I will cut the cripple studs out after I get the windows framed. Now I'm just making this a group and I'm going to stand it upright and put it on top of the concrete pad. Now I'm just going to copy that over because each of the four sections is going to be the same. This front wall is 16 feet tall and the back wall is going to be 8 feet tall. I'm only going to put a couple windows in the back because I want to minimize heat loss. Now I'm just putting in some jack studs. Now I can make this a group and stand it upright and put it on the concrete pad. Again, putting 2x6s around the window so I can attach the window to them. Now I'm just going to copy this section 3 times. Now I'm just going to build some roof trusses. I'm not a truss builder, but I think this is how they go, or something similar. At least I think it'll work for demonstration purposes. Now I'm just going to copy the trusses 24 inches on center. Now we can start working on the end walls. I'm not going to show any windows or doors in these end walls because the construction will be the same as the other two walls. Here I'm just putting in a top plate for this wall. My measurement wasn't quite right, but it's good enough for SketchUp. I just want to make sure that my seams land over a stud. I almost forgot to put a stud at the end of the wall. Now I'm just going to make this wall a group and move it down to the other side. I forgot to make the interior studs 2x4s, so I'm just going back and doing that now. I'm not sure how my anchor bolts got moved out of place, but I need to just go back and put them closer to the edge. These anchor bolts are threaded, and each bolt will have a washer and a nut on it after you install your walls. Now I'm going to put 2 inches of rigid foam insulation on the outside of the walls. Now I can put the same 2-inch insulation on all the other walls. Then I can just copy that to the other side because it's exactly the same. Now I will put insulation on the back wall. Now I'm just going to put some blocking between the trusses so they don't fall over. I'm putting a row at the top and the bottom and in the middle. Now I'm going to put 3/4 inch plywood sheathing on the outside. I'm going to drop it down about an inch or two below the wall so that water doesn't have a chance to wick up under the wall. Now I can just copy all this plywood sheathing to the other side. I was thinking about thermal bridging. That's when you have a 2x4 or 2x6 that goes from the inside of your building to the outside, and the heat can travel out of your house to the outside. This is one reason why we have continuous foam insulation. But I had a thought that the 2 by 6 around the window could be a 2 by 4. It just needs to be on the outside of the wall. That way, the thermal bridge will be minimized. Now I'm just going to continue with the plywood sheathing all the way around. Now we're going to put some plywood sheathing on the roof. I see that the roof does not come to a peak, which could be an issue. So let's just pretend that I made these trusses with a peak at the top. Or you can cut out little wooden triangles and nail them on the top. It would probably be better to do this ahead of time. Okay, now for the roof sheathing. And now for the outriggers that create our eaves. These are going to be 6 foot long 2 by 6s. 2 feet of this board is going to be at 5.5 inches wide. The other 4 feet is going to be cut down to 3.5 inches wide. The notch will be right at the edge of the roof, and these will be placed 24 inches on center all around the perimeter of the roof. The pieces in the corners will be a little bit longer. The corner pieces have to be long enough to meet up with the edges of the two sides. Just draw a line along the outside edges and then measure the distance to the intersection. Now I'm going to put on the subfascia, and you can cut these rafters vertical if you want, or just leave them the way they are. I didn't get the angle quite right on this side piece, but I'm sure you will. Now I'm going to put 3.5 inches of rigid foam insulation on top of the roof. Then I'm going to put another 2 inches of rigid foam insulation on top of that. Now I'm going to put 1x4 strapping across the roof at 2 feet on center. Okay, that wasn't quite right. This strapping has to go all the way to the edge of the roof. Now I'm going to put 1x4 strapping horizontally across all of those boards. And these are also 2 feet on center. Now I'm going to put some steel panels on the roof. I really like the green color. Now you can finish off the house in the normal way. The sun will come in through the front windows and heat up the concrete during the day. Then the concrete will release its heat at night.